Her story deals with a subculture of heavy metal music that some feel is sending a dangerous message to your kids.
The forces of evil on the dark side of devil right.
And I want to talk tonight about the devil and demons and witches and wizards.
And we just mix it up with hardcore and aggression and come out with something we think's an original sound.
Loud, fast, heavy, you know.
Well, what do you got?
What do you got?
Welcome back to another episode of the Riff Worship Podcast, where we talk all things who, what, when, where, why, how, the fucking riff. Today, join with me as always, my two friends in music and life, Austin Paulson, Justin Swindle. How are you guys doing?
Good to see you. Another member of the bald community back with us again.
You can't have too many on at one time because, things just start to happen.
Too much glare.
Too much glare, and then we start to multiply. So it's like it's like getting a mogwai wet. It just starts to happen.
I was joking in our group chat that Jack was pooping with the door open when he joined the chat, trying to assert his ball dominance right from the get-go.
Listen, that's how it works. That's how it works. One time is all it takes.
It was great. I mean, it was such a fun chat, and it's good to be on the call with people who are just as fucking dorky about this shit as we are. And I love, we talked about the most brutal, technically proficient kind of grind record. And then all of his recommendations were basically ambient kind of jazz, saxophone type stuff, which I've been enjoying all week long. I think it's been perfect for this kind of fucking dreary ass weather we've been experiencing,
and you've had a really good week too.
Yeah.
Your week has been
not bad at all.
Everything's good. Everything's fine.
Anyway, man, we are talking about a record that is loaded with shit today, and that shit is riffs. I was hard pressed to find one that I didn't enjoy. And I'm talking about this wonderful gem of a record, 1993's Heartwork.
She sure is beautiful.
It is a very divisive record, I would say. Friend of the show, John Hoffman, is not the biggest fan of this record.
Oh, he loves this record.
Hank loves hookers, man.
Yeah, I don't know. There's, he's definitely in the camp of folks who maybe kind of stand by the band's earlier material, and as soon as they started to incorporate more tuneful, melodic, technical elements into their songwriting, he just kind of out one ear. Yep.
In one ear, out the
in
other.
ear, out through the door, in through the outdoor,
in through the outdoor.
Yeah, John no like.
John no like. Me like a lot. Me like so much, me went backwards. No, but seriously, this was my first time hearing the band Carcass. I bought a copy of Choosing Death from Hastings Music in 2004. And I still have that copy. It's right over here. It's falling the fuck apart. But I saw that cover. I read about the band and went, that's the record I have to get. Whatever that is on the cover, I have to get it. And to me, it looks like, obviously a spine, a peace sign. And I initially thought it was somebody's Gam Gams cigarette pack at the top with the little latch, but it's actually not. But to me, it will always be that. Man, what a great fucking record to entry into death metal or melodic death metal, or even some of the early Scandinavian melodic black metal that's out there. This record to me is held in extremely high regard, and is also held in regard by many others that came before and after. And I had to go backwards with the band. This was my starting point for Carcass. So going back and hearing Necrotism and Symphonies and fucking Recaputrefaction throughout the time period, because I think I downloaded Heartwork through LimeWire, individual songs, because that's the only access I had to it at first. Then I found a copy of Recaputrefaction and bought it. So it's all right, here's here's finesse, here's like precision, and then this thing that is taken years to grow on me with that. Like, I love symphonies a lot. Necrotism's a almost prog death to a certain extent. But like Reek is the only one that really has taken this long to grow on me. But this band's great. I think everything about this band is fun. The early leanings of this band are pretty hilarious. Any interview I've seen with all these guys, they're fun to watch. They're fun to listen to. But that's enough on that shit. Swindle, I want to ask you first. Do you have any familiarity with Carcass aside from name? If you do, when did you first hear them? And if not, is this your first time hearing them?
Well, I don't have any familiarity with the band, and this was my first time hearing them. First record.
Did you go back at all yet, or is this we're just sticking with Heartwork as of right now?
I listened to the one before Heartwork, like right before this episode.
Sure. That's Mike's first record with the band too. That one was actually the last one I think I picked up getting into the band. I think I had Swan Song even before I purchased Necrotism. It was just whatever was accessible for me at the time. And luckily when I got into the band, that's right before they started releasing all those great digipack editions that had the DVD and all of that with it. So those were starting to become much more accessible. But what did you think? Obviously, we'll talk about the record, but what did you think upon first listen of this band?
Before listening to, or before reading the notes, I was like, this definitely sounds like it came out in the early 90s, not production wise, but it sounds like they listened to Pantera.
Sure. And I'm glad you bring that up, because upon doing the research for this, that was the first time that it ever clicked to me of like, oh yeah, there's kind of those parts in here. Never dawned on me. I was just like, this is what this band sounds like. But upon reading it, and once we get into this, there's some noticeable shit on this record that goes, oh yeah, they definitely listen to like Vulgar Display of Power a lot.
Yeah. Or even Cowboys.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Austin, you and I have talked about Carcass for years, but what was your first foray into this band?
I would say, I think I kind of first got into them when they started doing the reunion stuff in like 2013, 2014. Because we caught them on the Inked and Steel tour, which had Carcass headlining, Obituary, Exhumed, and Noisem. I think Macabre was on another select dates, but we caught that tour at the Exit Inn. And so I was like kind of just dabbling, because you're like, oh, well, we got to see this. Like, there's no way we're going to miss this. And we did manage to miss Noisem and Exhumed.
Yes.
I think we managed to get there for like part of Obituary set, but we caught Carcass, and I mean, it was heavy. It was almost like they had, at the time, not even knowing. And what I remember now, it's like they had never really even like skipped a beat. Like they were tight. It was funny, like all of the shit in between songs, just absolutely hilarious. And we got a lot of that in the research with the notes and everything. Like, it's so funny. Like, this band clearly cares about the craft of songwriting and what they're doing, but they also like kind of don't give a fuck like about it. Like, nothing is sacred, nothing's serious.
No. Matter of fact, at that show, I remember I leaned into you, and this was after vocalist Jeff Walker had made some sort of statement. And I looked at you and I went, Justin Swindle. That's all I said to him, was just like, Justin Swindle. I was like, he would die, because it's very like dry, almost silly Mel Brooks shit that was coming out of his mouth. I went, all right, this is perfect.
It was great. So, through that experience and then going back and kind of combing through the discography, I mean, I definitely started here and worked my way back. I would say, as of right now, and again, we can talk about this at a later point in the episode, but I'd say that this definitely stands up there. Like, I think you could kind of pair this and Necroticism obviously together. I think Necroticism has like some really cool kind of more, you said prog, like I feel like there's definitely more, I don't know if space the right word, but they get to play around a little bit more,
Sure.
which I like. This is like this is a very refined version of that. I'm a huge fan of Symphonies of Sickness.
Mhm.
I think that's like
That's
such
a fucking great record.
an amazing record for like what that era of the band means. So yeah, I love that we get to talk about this. We actually did in our very first episodes talked about Heartwork, the song, and touched on some of the details of this, but this will kind of serve as a more thorough kind of exploration of the band's history and this album. So I'm glad we get to actually do that today.
Yeah. I think this is one of those records that there's so much that comes from it, and there's so much more about this band than you ultimately know and realize, and who helped create and who helped write and all of this shit. And there are so many bands that formed after listening to this, or even another album that's held in the same regard as this, which is At the Gate, Slaughter of the Soul, which will get talked about at some point. But those two records are kind of helped form a subgenre. But they didn't start out that way. It didn't start out as this tuned up melodic death metal band or whatever you want to call it. It just sounds like heavy metal to me. It just sounds like refined, very catchy heavy metal to me. But man, the roots of this band started way back in 1985.
Yeah. Old Liverpool, England, just a small little skiffle band, just playing on jugs and fucking
playing in Hamburg, Germany at the
oh man, Carcass Mania when they came to America. But no, Dill's right. The band Carcass essentially formed in 1985, or at least like the foundations of what we know as Carcass in Liverpool, England. Guitarist Bill Steer, drummer Ken Owen. These guys had known each other since they were like, I guess for lack of a better American term, like kindergarten. They would know each other since childhood. And they kind of started this idea for a band, and it didn't really take off initially and actually kind of dissolved. It wasn't until maybe a few years later and a few other projects that Carcass would kind of rear its head again. But Bill Steer and Ken, they were very much into a lot of the traditional kind of heavy metal leaning bands that you might know, Judas Priest, Fist, Tigers of Panting, a lot of which, I think they would dispute what this record sounds like, but I think you could make the argument that a lot of those early leanings are found on this record as well. It wasn't until they got into more extreme music like Slayer. One band that definitely comes up a lot is Siege, kind of like the power violence, kind of just ridiculous, kind of noisy band from here in the States was mentioned. Genocide, which later became Repulsion, also mentioned. They had some of those early releases, early demos and releases by Death. So kind of hearing all of this extreme music and wanting to be a part of that and just essentially start your own band. And so I think that's kind of where the idea came from. But so Carcass dissolves. Bill Steer ends up joining a local kind of D-beat Discharge clone called Disattack. He performed on their demo, A Bomb Drops from 1986. Disattack's bassist left, and they got in this guy who'd been recently kicked out of like kind of a thrashy hardcore band called Electro Hippies, which I couldn't help but think that was the Muppet Band name. I know it's not, but it's
my God,
probably the rival band of Electric Teeth.
It's Electric Wizard's alternative, like doppelganger, right? Like the evil doppelganger.
So in comes bassist Jeff Walker, joining Disattack. They kind of at around the same time, Bill Steer also joins Napalm Death, another soon-to-be legendary local grind death metal band. So with that, I don't know if it was exactly like, I think there was just a shift happening all around in the local scene. So they wanted to kind of maybe follow in that kind of realm, listening to a lot of like death metal and extreme music. So they wanted to shift up their sound a little bit. So they invited Bill's old friend Ken to kind of come on the drums. They got Jeff. And then they had Disattack's original singer, kind of rounding out this 4-piece and then readopting the Carcass name. And so they did end up putting out a demo as a 4-piece called Flesh Ripping Sonic Torment, which, you know, I will argue this. I think the quality of the demo, the musically, sounds way better than Reek. I think it sounds better than Reek.
I fucking agree. When you buy whatever copy of Reek that you get, maybe aside from a vinyl record, I believe it comes with the demo. The expanded edition I bought later on had it, and I agree. The demo sounds better than the actual recording.
And I will say, I don't necessarily. I think it's Sanji Sumner was the original vocalist of this band. You know, it's cool that you can kind of like peep what this might have ended up like. You get a little taste of the history of this band. They may have played a few shows together, but ultimately they just became a 3-piece after a while.
It's wild to think too that Bill's name is tied with Napalm Death. I believe he played on the B-side of Scum.
He did.
He obviously is in Carcass. Helped essentially form the roots of what this British grindcore movement was. Yeah, he wasn't a original member of Napalm, but he was the first group of first member of Napalm, like when the band was starting to move forward, right? You know, you had Lee, who went on to form Cathedral and do Rise Above Records and all this shit. So like it all kind of starts there. And I'd be surprised if early Carcass shows didn't take place at the Mermaid.
I'm sure. I'm sure they had to have 100%.
You know, it's talking about how this band formed and these guys being kids and growing up together, essentially all meeting by the time they're like 16 or 17 years old, and seeing some of the photos and Choosing Death of how young these kids were when they started like primary school and that shit. You definitely know that these guys did not form their band while pissing at a urinal in the bathroom of a club like Bolt Thrower did.
Yeah, another big one from the scene.
Yep.
I think really what kind of sets this band apart, you know, kind of playing into the really like tongue-in-cheek kind of pissing people off sort of mentality that you'll find with just the interviews and really just the themes of this early stuff is that, you know, records like Reek and Symphonies, they kind of contain all of these very graphic, like medically accurate, you know, lyrics and imagery. I mean, the first couple of releases, they, you know, have like essentially got censored because you can't put like these collages of like mutilated guts and gore on them. But it was, from what I understand, like kind of a direct opposition to some of like the themes and lyrics that you'd find in other death metal bands. Like they were not down with like the misogyny and like the Satanism aspect of a lot of death metal of that time. So when Ken is kind of surprisingly a lot of where this early work and inspiration comes from, because he had a master in biology. And he even says like, if I wasn't going to be in Carcass, I'd probably be a doctor at this fucking point. But you're kind of rummaging through these dictionaries and really utilizing all of these very descriptive and grotesque words. So yeah, but it was just really kind of, this is so ridiculous, we have to do it.
There's bits and pieces from Choosing Death that I, in preparation for the episode, just jogged my memory with, that of like Ken sitting down with it's either Ken or maybe it's Bill's sister's medical textbook, and they're going through and they're like, let's go scan these photos. Let's use this. Let's do I think collage.
It's Jeff's sister or something was like a nurse or something like that. Either way, like they're all just sitting there, and I know they're just fucking cackling the entire time they're doing this because it's so ridiculous, right? Yeah.
And it is funny to think that this early era of the band in this early period's kind of what the band is still known as. They're still known as this like kind of gore influenced grind band, which they haven't really been a grind band since the first record, truthfully, if you want to say that. Like, Symphonies is 50-50.
I don't even know if they would have, I don't know, all throughout this band's career, I don't know if they like really like the grind and death kind of tagline, just because they were like, well, we're just playing what we know. We're just playing what we like. So
and there are so many bands that have created their basis off of the type of band they want to become off of these first few records, right? You don't get Exhumed without it. You don't get General Surgery a few years later. You don't get tons of gore grind bands that are out there. And there's a great tribute band that Relapse released many years later called the County Medical Examiners. And it was a tribute to the first two records. And it sounds honestly like someone just took everything that was on symphonies, wadded it up, put it in a blender and regurgitated it. And it's great. Like, it's a lot of fucking fun. But just the fact that these guys are kind of taking the piss out on like death and grind and all this stuff early on is very fitting to who they are.
So with all the themes and imagery in mind, Bill Steer obviously being in Napalm Death, you have the Earache connection. Digby Pearson, founder of Earache Records, gets a hold of the demo, looks at some of the lyrics, and was like instantly like, we got to record a record. Like, we have to, this is something I need to put out. So they go into the studio, Rich Bitch Studios in Birmingham, England.
There it is.
And I think they had like maybe 4 days to put it together. Like, shoestring
3 days
budget.
too many.
Just get in there, do it. And, you know, this is a new band. This is essentially like, you know, one of your first experiences in a studio. I think with their inexperience and just the engineer also really probably not knowing how to capture this style of music or maybe even just do it in general, like completely fumbled through the production of this LP. Like, to the point where they spent so much time mixing it afterwards that like the drums were like almost like couldn't even use them. I think they did have to re-record or re-engineer a lot of it at some point. One of the things that I even remember being when they set it off to the pressing plant, they had to like, there's a quote from Bill that says, "I don't know anyone who's blown any speakers while playing the first Carcass LP. Perhaps it might have caused some damage if the pressing hadn't been so quiet.
Yeah.
But the guy at the pressing plant told Dig that it had to be that way or else the bass frequencies would take over completely. He said he'd never heard such a low frequency on an album." So
that is phenomenal. When you've got the guy at the pressing plant going like, "What have you done?" Like, what have you done? What have you put to tape here? And now you look at that 35 years later and everyone's like, "Oh yeah, sure, bring it. Yeah, come on."
Yeah.
Don't forget to credit the engineer by his nickname.
Yeah. What
Mike it up wrongly, Ivory? Wasn't that it?
Is that a Jeff Walker statement?
It has to be, but it's like, yeah, dude, we'll credit you. Oh yeah, sure, you'll make it on the record. Such a bummer. But yeah, it's got to be demoralizing when it's supposed to be an exciting thing, right? You go into the studio and you're putting these songs to tape and it just comes out sounding like absolute horseshit. And so it was, after the release of the record, they just for several years, pretty much disowned it completely.
That's how you know Carcass ain't a black metal band.
They didn't own it because they're just like, no, this actually sounds like shit and we're admitting it. As opposed to like a couple of those fucking trolls in Norway are like, no, we did it this way for a reason.
Right.
Carcass is like, fuck off.
Please,
we know what you're doing.
Please don't listen to this.
Which surprisingly is not what happened, because despite the way it fucking sounded, despite the negative reviews it got, people liked it. People had never heard anything like it before. So it kind of generated this small, underground metal following. And then out of fucking nowhere, John Peel, of course, from BBC Radio 1, it made his favorite album of 1988. And he even invited the band on to record a session with them, much like they had with Napalm Death. So here's another guy, of course, known for putting on a lot of like abstract, weird, heavy music of that time. Fucking love this record. So I guess it's not all bad.
I would pay money to go back in time just to sit around at some British family's home and they're listening to like Radio 1. It's like a Monday evening. And like, you know, Ken and Tennille's playing. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, and here's You Suffer, followed by Regurgitation of Giblets. Like just wham. And those songs are going to go by in less than 60 seconds.
So first record comes out in 88. They do Appeal Session in 89. And then like basically that summer, they begin recording their follow-up album, Symphonies of Sickness. Now, around this time, Bill's couple-year tenure with Napalm Death had come to an end. Like Dylan mentioned, he's on the B-side of Scum. He's also on the follow-up record From Enslavement to Obliteration in 88. He's featured on a split with the Japanese hardcore band SOB. He's on the live EP. And also, most importantly, I guess for the context of our conversation, Mentally Murdered, an EP that came out in 89. And so during the recording of this Napalm Death EP, they recorded at Slaughterhouse Studios in East Yorkshire, England, with producer Colin Richardson, who, again, another kind of name amongst this era and this scene, basically the English Scott Burns. Like, he recorded everybody from Carcass to Napalm Death to Bolt Thrower, we've mentioned in previous episodes. But essentially, when Bill was at the studio and working with Colin, he knew that this was like the best producer I'd ever worked with. So when they were gearing up to do Symphonies of Sickness, they brought him in and recorded the record with him. And wouldn't you know it, you get someone who knows what they're doing, it's going to sound a lot better. And thus you kind of have this record that they feel is really the first time that someone had properly captured their sound, their essence. They don't call it a perfect record, but it's, you know, I would say maybe it is maybe like the proper first full length for the band.
It doesn't sound like a demo, right?
Yeah.
It sounds like an official full length. And it's where the band started to sound like them. It's where Carcass started to solidify what they were going to sound like. And if you're not familiar with that record, there's some really wild, interesting shit going on in it, like doomy riffs and all sorts of stuff that you wouldn't imagine. Keyboards and synths, like horror sounding synths that are awesome. It's a wild fucking record.
A lot of that could be due to just Colin's inclusion on the record. They mentioned like he had a lot of input and how the band would sound. And, you know, I'd imagine he probably helped add a lot of that atmosphere for the record. There's like some samples that are a lot of fun on that. But also they just had more time to fucking work on it. So you go in, you get it done. And this was a big deal. And, you know, it's so funny. There's a really great Carcass archive that I found that had like all of these old like out of print interviews and reviews, and come to find that like even with this record, and this is kind of just the trajectory of the band throughout the, you know, up until like they broke up in the mid 90s, people even complained about how this record sounded. Like it wasn't grotesque enough, it wasn't shitty enough. Like people complain. But it's like, no, this is like a cleaned up version of that thing. Like it's still rooted in all of this kind of filthy grind, but people still griped about it, which is insane to me.
There's something about metal fans. They'll complain.
God,
Rob,
at this point, it just feels like in 2025, it feels like everybody would complain about something. I mean, that's why we're here, right?
That's all we do.
That's it. That's what we're here for. And it's so wild that like that first record's 39 to 40 minutes long. That's not including the other 20 some odd songs that are the demo. It is absolutely baffling to me that album is 40 minutes long. And this one's shorter, I believe. Maybe by like a minute. Songs are a little bit longer, right? They start getting into that territory. It goes from a 35-second song to
So yeah, Reek is 39, Symphonies is 43.
Oh, okay. I was off. Oh man, they sold out. They pushed it. Fucking 43 minutes, man. They pushed it.
Can't do it.
Can't do it.
You better not.
And it is like there's more clarity on this record. Songs are a little bit more fleshed out, right? They actually start to feel like songs. And as you mentioned before, this band really does have a great grasp of songwriting about what they want to hear. And the fact that they've released an album in less than a year and they're already hearing cries of sellout. Whereas like I think Napalm even dealt with that too when it went from Scum to Enslavement. And it's like, fucking what is going on?
This record also is important to note because it kind of marks a shift in the band's trajectory a little bit. So, released November 4th, 1989, they embarked on a lot of, like, I think they mentioned that things started to kind of ramp up from here in that, like, they were on a bunch of pretty significant tours. One of note that maybe just like a few weeks after this was released, the 1989 UK Grind Crusher tour, which featured kind of like a slew of earache bands, including Napalm Death, Morbid Angel, Boat Thrower. They went on several tours throughout 1990 through various regions of Europe with bands like Entomb, Deadhead, Godflesh, Napalm, Carnage, Atrocity, and more. They even toured the United States supporting Death for a few months on the Nauseating North America tour. They also kind of signed their first proper deal with Earache because initially it was almost kind of like a handshake and like, hey, you'll just put it out and it'll be fine. Leading up to the third record is where they actually did sign something in ink, and that was that. But they also really couldn't like do this style anymore. Like there's really nowhere else to go. I mean, this sort of music I feel like does have like kind of a ceiling. Like what more, how gross or how like brutal can this really be? We have all the lyrical themes. We've kind of explored all this territory already. We either keep doing it and that is fine, but it's boring, or we can start to kind of include some other elements and influence. And that's essentially kind of what they did for the next record, Necroticism, or how I should say, Necroticism, descanting the insalubrious. Yeah, what?
Is it I mispronounced it.
I think Austin was right.
They started to get more melodic and start including more just like technicality in their playing. They were getting better. It's just, where you need to go somewhere. You can't just keep putting and that obviously pissed off a lot of people, but I don't think this band ever really like was writing for anyone in particular other than themselves. So that's kind of where we're at here with this 1991 album. It's also the first album to feature guitarist Michael Amott, who rounds this band out to a 4-piece, which they hadn't been since their demo. Now, Michael was an English-born Swedish guitar player. He was previously a member of a kind of a crust punk band called Disaccord before starting a pretty cult HM2 fueled Swedish death metal band Carnage. Maybe you've heard of their demos. Dark Recollections is like a classic of that kind of era and genre.
Yes, it is. That might be my favorite like early Swedish death metal record is that one. It's Mike on guitar and then it's Matt of Dismember later on vocals on it, and it's fucking great. It's nasty.
So I also heard a story just to kind of maybe tie it in how far this goes back. Like allegedly Michael was asked to join Napalm Death at a certain point while Bill was still in the band. And so he was brought in, they kind of rehearsed, and he really only wanted to join Napalm Death under the guise that Bill would also be, he wanted to play along Bill. Like he admired Bill's playing, wanted to be in a band with him. Bill kind of took him aside and basically told him like, hey, I'm actually going to be leaving. I'm going to be kind of shifting my focus into Carcass. So you're kind of like going to be my replacement. Because of that, he declined that offer. But, now knowing that he wanted to play with Bill, Bill was like, well, why don't you join us in Carcass? Like you could be our second guitar. but he had heard Reek and he fucking hated it. He thought it sucked. So he was like, actually, no, I'm good on that.
He hears that and it's like, sure, I'm going home.
Yeah, I'll write you. I don't know.
Yeah, I'll write you. I'm cool with sending tapes back and forth, bud, but
Gave him the pat on the head.
I don't think we're
It's a
doing this.
good band, buddy.
I loved finding out that when Sickness or Symphonies came out, he went, fuck, what have I done? It was just like, oh no, I've shit the bed. And he's like, hey, can I come do this again? Sure, come on.
It's a good thing they weren't petty. Weren't like some fucking American bands. Weren't like Dave Mustaine or James Hetfield or...
Nobody's as petty as Dave Mustaine. Nobody. No fucking body.
Hey, you know what?
I don't care.
For consistency on just being a hater for all this time, up until the end.
Literally till the end?
To the end. And, I'm sure it won't be the last we hear from him, but... So yeah, Michael joins on the touring for Symphonies, and they start to essentially write necroticism during this period of time. Kind of started in early 90. Then they kind of continued to write into 91 before reconnecting with Colin in Amazon Studios in Simonswood, Lancashire, UK. Another studio. Released around like at Halloween 91, showcasing kind of this new songwriting style, as I mentioned before. I think it was their best selling at this point, probably. I would assume so. People again weren't big fans of it, and they were so fucking dramatic about this album. There was one review in particular I found in that archive that said, "What malady has befallen the gods of gore? Some of the rumors, as much as I hate to say it, are true."
Stop.
It's malady.
That's malady, not malady.
I was picturing this guy with a fucking
Fedora.
What malady?
Milady.
What malady has befallen the gods of gore? Some of the rumors, as much as I hate to say it, are true. Carcass, the once sickest band around, has forgotten how to grind. It's
my God.
Fucking
did you listen to the record? Did you listen to it? Like, it's on it. Yeah, you've got a track like Incarnated Solvent Abuse that has a video. And you've got, I think Tools of the Trade is on that record. And like, you have all these really catchy tracks, but like, it's still, the elements of where they were are still there. It's just more refined and gotten a little bit more like weird even.
Oh, there are some amazing fucking riffs on that record. Like, honestly, I really like it. I think it kind of can go toe to toe depending on my mood with Heartwork. I mean, really, like Corporal Jigsaw Quandary, Pedigree Butchery. Like, I mean, there are some fucking amazing songs on that record, and I would definitely, would not ever leave that out of the conversation.
That I also like the fact too that they still loosely, throughout the band's whole career, they've kept up with the kind of medical thing all throughout, like with their album covers. Obviously, this one's not as extreme. It's just the 4 photos of those guys like interspersed on this. It's a medical tray, right? Like getting ready for like a surgery prep or something.
Yeah, and then what's the comp or like the best of with the
Choice Cuts.
Yeah, that's just the rules.
Choice Cuts is there. Yeah, and it's just Bill, Jeff, and Ken on the cover of that one. Like they've stuck with it. It's that tongue's so implanted in their cheek, they've had to have it physically removed by a doctor. Like it's so much in there, and it's all in there. Just wedge it in there. And the fact that I'm thinking if there's a modern band or a contemporary band that's dealt with cries of sellout on every single record without it sounding any too vastly different, right? With it just progressing. And I can't think of anything off the top of my head.
No, and it's not like, it would be one thing if it was like such a drastic shift, but it isn't. People, I think what's so crazy about Heartwork is that people do kind of, when the people gripe about it, I feel like they almost talk about it like it is such a drastic shift from, the first records. Like, and I suppose if you were to put those on back to back, maybe
Oh, yeah.
you have that argument, but that's not what happened. It was like a gradual progression to this record we're talking about today. Like, it's not this crazy asinine
Sure.
thing. The melodicism has existed basically from the beginning in my belief.
It's
but
there.
yeah. So this is just it. Now it's at the forefront. Now it's on Heartwork. And they begin writing that record essentially during the time of necroticism, the touring for that. They liked where they were at with that record. I think they were trying to basically, I think Bill or Jeff kind of describes them as kind of trying to prove to themselves that they were able to write in such a kind of like technical, like they were really trying to challenge themselves on that.
Sure.
Now with this record, they're kind of trying to make it more straightforward. I think there was even a line where they said a lot of that technical shit really wasn't catching on with a lot of people live.
Yeah.
But there were some of the more straightforward tracks from necroticism that they could tell, like, okay, maybe we need to like scale this back a little bit. They purposely wanted to write shorter songs, more straightforward, trim the fat.
Yep. That's almost verbatim what a certain San Francisco band did from 89 to 91 or 88 to 91. What's the Kirk Hammett quote? We would be playing Injustice for All on tour, and I would watch people falling asleep during Injustice for All, and I knew we had to do something different. So much different form of music or subgenre here, but like even those guys were just like, yeah, some of the more technically challenging stuff from necroticism isn't necessarily like clicking with everybody. We like it, but we also like these more kind of fundamental tracks that we have, the straightforward ones. Like, can we do that while still having these different elements of like technical proficiency that we have? Because it's definitely on the record we're talking about today.
Oh, there's still some weird shit on here.
Oh my God.
On the back half of the record, especially. Whoa. Oh, there's some wild stuff. But yeah, you're right. And you mentioned, Metallica, and they mentioned them and Nirvana and a couple, I believe in that Decibel magazine kind of Hall of Fame, where we weren't necessarily taking influence from them sonically, but the aspect of like, these are just great fucking like rock punk records. Like this is just the song. Like it doesn't need to be overly complex. It can be like, I mean, the album itself opens up with essentially like a hard rock song. So like you're getting that
mid-tempo.
Oh yeah. Lots of some kind of stompy mid-tempo riffs on this record. But they also mentioned like, they were listening to bands like Helmet and Vicious Rumors, and Pantera gets mentioned a little bit too in some of the interviews. And, I think at a certain point, like you're expanding as a songwriter, you're listening to different things. They kind of mentioned like, we weren't like, trying to find every like third fucking copy of a demo from some death metal band in Scandinavia anymore. We were listening to a lot of the stuff that was going on, some of the more like maybe contemporary bands of the era and different styles of music. So it was just kind of a natural thing, whether they knew it or not, that it was going to go into their playing style. And so that's kind of what ends up on here. They were writing a lot on tour. They kind of mentioned that they had this like drum machine, this massive drum machine that Ken had purchased at some point on the 92 tour with Napalm Death. So it'd be like Bill and Ken kind of rehearsing together. And then Jeff would essentially take some of these cassettes, and he had like a 4-track, and he would kind of like edit it together. And they mentioned doing this kind of on the bus and maybe in Jeff's house. Like all the prior releases they would do in like in the spare bedroom of Bill's parents' house. Now they're kind of bringing this shit on tour. They're doing it at Jeff's house. Obviously Michael Amott being a huge, like his influences on the previous record, but I believe had like at least 6 songs that he had co-written with Bill on this record. So he's definitely not out of the equation either. I mentioned Ken being a really important factor of the earlier work. I think he kind of takes a back seat as far as like the songwriting output, whereas it's more Bill, Mike, and Jeff that are doing most of the work of like shaping how this record sounds.
I believe you're right. And I think Bill's quoted as saying like any of the early Carcass songs or Carcass of the really gross and sick sounding stuff was Ken. He would just sit with an acoustic guitar and record into this tape or a tape player or 4-track or whatever he had, not having really any knowledge of how to play it, just like he could come up with a group of notes or a cluster of notes that just sounded cool. And they used a lot of that stuff on those first 3 records. And this is the first record where everybody kind of focuses on one singular thing, ultimately. Like Mike and Bill are progressing as guitar players. They're getting better. This is like the record that they're really focused on. This record being Heartwork, that they're really focused on being as good as they could and as streamlined as they can with their guitar playing. Ken's drumming is above and beyond what it was even just a couple years before. Jeff has this great ability to place phrases and lyrics in spots that I wouldn't normally think to put it. And everyone's just really honed in on what they're doing. It sounds like a really toured band, right? Like just a really tight toured band. And, Mike's presence is felt all over this record, which is weird to realize how the recording went, but we'll get to that.
Yeah, and they did a lot of prep for this record. I mean, they came in around like February 93 at Par Studios in Liverpool, and they recorded in like the smallest room, and they basically put together like a really good demo of all of the songs that they could give Colin ahead of like the actual final sessions that would occur much later. But yeah, so there's these demos, and I think it's on the deluxe version of the album where you can hear them. You kind of mentioned guys honing in on particular things. Bill's vocals are absent from this as opposed to like the previous releases. He kind of provides that like low guttural vocal. He, as you mentioned again, wanted to focus more on the guitar playing. It wasn't for lack of trying. They actually did like, please sing on this record. And it got to the point where I feel like he had made his peace with it. And he was so annoyed that he just like walked out for an hour. He's like, I'm done talking about it. I'm not doing it. But you have Jeff kind of putting in the work on his own vocals, and on the demos in particular, they're like seem kind of to put it a Jack McBride kind of quote here. They're fried. These vocals are fried as hell. They got a very raspy quality to it, and that's because I think the night before, Brutal Truth and Cathedral were playing, and he went to the show and smoked a little hash with everybody, and then had to record these vocals, but it completely fucked up his performance a little bit there. But he says he likes the demos almost a little bit more, at least at a certain point. He's like, the demo versions of the songs were a lot rawer than the album ones. I have to say I kind of prefer them. So
isn't hash, doesn't it like not get you fucked up? Isn't
you're talking to the wrong guys?
Case. Yeah. What I know of hash is when hearing in movies from the 60s and 70s referring to it as hashish, and hearing Ricky from the Trailer Park Boys attempt to sell it repeatedly.
It may be different now, but I think people used to have to use hash in like brownies or like food stuff to use it to get high, because I thought for some reason you couldn't smoke hash and get high. I don't know. It's been fucking almost 20 years since I smoked weed. So
let's put this out to the few people that listen to the show. How does that work? What happens? Jeff, let us know.
We're not cops. Just tell us.
No, I'm not. No.
Ignore this. Ignore this.
Damn.
By the spring of 93, they completed work on these demos. And then they went on essentially a European run with Cannibal Corpse and Death. And you'd think you're going on tour, you're going to play some of the songs that people know. They did not do that. They played like all of the songs from this record on tour. So songs that no one's ever heard of before. And probably, I'm sure there's some dickhead in the crowd going like, play anything off of fucking Symphonies or Reek or whatever. You're getting like a new album that is far more melodic than the previous shit you've heard. And I'm sure you can make the argument too. You test them out live, you play them. But it is kind of an interesting choice to just like, you know what? Fuck them. We're just playing the whole new record. This record's not even out yet. This is the songs we're playing. And
like, what a tour to do that on too, right? You've got Death, who are arguably the creators of this subgenre you're a part of. You've got Cannibal Corpse, who are essentially kind of the most popular up and comers at that point. With this is pre Ace Ventura, but this is post Tomb of the Mutilated. Death is either in the process of writing or had just finished recording Human. Correct? This is 93.
Yeah. So when did that come out?
Was Human 93 and Individual Thought Patterns was 95? Was it, or am I off by a year
Just fucking go on. Just fucking make your point.
You've got Death, who is this great. Oh, Swindle. Can't let me talk for a minute. You've got Death, who is this very forward-thinking band, right? That is not wanting to get stuck in any sort of constant loop of, we're this gore-influenced death metal band. We're just doing scream bloody gore, spiritual healing over and over again. And then you've got Carcass that's like, new record, that's it.
Yep.
We got 30 minutes. You're getting 30 minutes of new songs.
So this record probably should have been recorded again in the spring. Before they like done this tour, I'm sure. But they were kind of like holding out. Like I mentioned, they were signed to Earache, and essentially like Digby and the Earache crew solidified a distribution deal with one Columbia Records, major label. And, other bands around this time, this year actually had, surprisingly, had records out on a major label. Cathedral being the first of the Earache bands. They had put out the Eternal Mirror on Columbia. Morbid Angel, as we've discussed in a previous episode. Covenant came out on Giant, which was a subsidiary of Warner. And so then you have this record, which, for all intents and purposes, is an Earache record, but in the United States was distributed by Columbia Records, which, again, is so insane to think that a record with blast beats and kind of like fucking, couple, just a few, ends up being on Columbia Records.
It is wild to think back then. Now it's really common, right? There are bands that are on major labels that have all these extreme qualities to them. But, in 92, 93, when all of these bands are still very firmly rooted in the underground, I guess the largest label that had really dealt with a lot of these bands would have been Roadrunner at this point in time. Just seeing Columbia or like Sony or Warner Brothers with their tagline on all of these things is pretty insane. The marketing for this record's pretty wild too. Like Columbia started sending out all of these press packages with like fake blood packs and all sorts of stuff to all these different record stores and posters and subway stations and all sorts of stuff. It makes me think back to when Wolverine Blues came out. Columbia made a deal with Marvel Comics to use Wolverine in an advert, like a poster. Album's got nothing to do with Wolverine at all. And they're just like, Wolverine Blues, here it is. But it is interesting too to look back and think that a lot of people had an issue with this record because they thought it was a major label record. It really isn't. They made it for Earache. It just happened to get distribution.
So recorded the demos in February. They went on tour. They were holding out for that distribution deal. They ended up entering Park Street Studios again in May 1993, and then they recorded the album for essentially like a month, kind of ending in like mid-June, again with Colin Richardson. However, he almost didn't do the record. This is a guy who understands the band sound, kind of helped cultivate the band sound to what it was at that point. But I think they were a little cheeky. Is that the British word for it? They were being a little dicks.
How did Jeff refer to it? We were such cunts back then. It seemed like they didn't want to fall maybe prey to we're using the in vogue producer now, right? Jeff in the Decibel Hall of Fame has referred to the Americans had Scott Burns. Colin was really in demand at that time. I think the Machine Head record was recorded around the same time frame. Colin's name had been associated with all these other records, and they thought about essentially not using them just for that reason alone, rather than any other reason to not use them.
Their one line was like, they thought like, oh, he's getting diluted by recording all these kind of lesser than bands. Like they're not as good as us. Why are you wasting your time like, fucking up your talents? You could be just putting our record out. So they almost went with I believe the in-house engineer and produced it themselves, but Colin kind of like took them off to the side and kind of talked their way back into recording the album. So this album being on Earache and having distribution with Columbia, you have like a much bigger budget. I think they listed it for 25,000 quid, which around $40,000 at the time, which was a lot of money for this type of record. They ended up initially booking studio time in like the biggest room at Parr Street. But like immediately were kind of met with like not being able to recreate the tones that they had when they were doing the demo. They just couldn't find the right sound. Like they spent like almost a week trying to figure out like what the fuck to do because they just weren't getting anything they liked. And then they thought, well, let's go back up to the small room upstairs. And within minutes, they were able to kind of recapture all the tones that they got. And so they just recorded this big budget record in the broom closet upstairs, essentially.
I think Bill had even stated that they had spent, a good portion of a week getting this guitar or working on getting a guitar sound. Yeah. Like $1,000 a day. And they're kind of just going, oh shit, what have we done? Yeah. What are we doing? And they go upstairs and get into the broom closet and it's boom. Hey, guitar sound's here. And it's one of the very first recordings of probably one of the most universally known high gain amps at that time in an extreme metal record, that being the 5150. And that kind of became Colin's thing for many years after that. It was that, an old Marshall head and something called a governor pedal that went in front of it. It's essentially a tube screamer.
A couple different things here. There's a quote from Bill Steer in Guitar World from '94 that says, yeah, if I remember correctly, almost all the guitar tracks were done at least 2 amps going at once. One of them being a large amp like the Anniversary on channel 2, a Marshall SLX 100 watt or the 5150, and then also more often than not, my 10 watt Marshall Valve State Microstack for extra texture. And then they had the governor pedal for some overdrive. I think a lot of these guys used, I know Bill is kind of more of like a Gibson player as well. I think there was like a Jackson soloist used as well. Maybe I think there's some Ibanez there as well.
Yeah, but he had a weird kind of catalog of guitars up to this point too. PV Nitros, Squire when he was playing in Napalm Death. I think the Gibson started to show around this time period too, which again kind of adds to the weird classic vibe of this record, right? But I mean, the guitar tone is now that's like the industry standard. That is the industry standard for like heavy music is that guitar sound. And it was just, hey, fuck it, it works. Let's do it. It sounds good.
But I think there's also still a level of like, fuck it. Well, like we kind of also don't know what the fuck we're doing. Cause there's one quote from the Decibel Hall of Fame where it's like, the kick drum ended up being 2 kick drums taped together to make an ultra long kick drum. The same with the cabs. We tape 2 Marshall cabs, take the back off of one, and gaffer tape them together to make a massively deep cab.
Don't know. I need to see proof of how that works. Just because it doesn't seem like, it just seems like those 4 dudes were like, what can we do to be really funny and we'll only get the joke? Because I've never heard of any other recording that they've done something like that with.
No, yeah, it's just, I don't know, make it bigger. It's like, I don't know, let's tape all of our skateboards together and we'll go like, what is this?
I mean, I've definitely seen Instagram videos where like, a person has a mic and like a really long tube going to the bass drum to like,
right,
change the sound of the recording.
You know what's funny? Now that I think about it, I'm almost fairly certain when we were doing the Dope Throne episode, we had like found in the video it looked like they had kind of done the same thing with the bass heads, where it was just like a hodgepodge of gear, just like cobbled together. Maybe a more extreme version of what we're talking about here, But yeah, I guess not necessarily unheard of. It's just kind of a ridiculous thing.
That's the thing they shove away so no one does it again.
Swindle, what are your thoughts on the artwork?
I didn't really pay much attention to the background to the cigarette case part of the art, but the foreground of it's pretty like simplistic. It's not crazy like a fucking Cradle of Filth album cover or anything like that.
Yeah, I think that's true. Like it's minimal, it's simplistic, like you said, which kind of matches, the songwriting. Just kind of like, here's what it is. It's not like grotesque imagery. It's a fucking sculpture or picture of a sculpture, like, which is crazy. And you got H.R. Geiger.
Mm-hmm. It's striking. It's you don't really know what it is. At least to my eyes, when I first saw it, I have no idea what that's going to sound like. The record doesn't sound like the artwork to me. And that's how I still measure a lot of records I listen to, is I want it to sound like what I'm seeing. And it just looks very almost sterile in a very strange way. And you mentioned it, it's Geiger. And even for Geiger, like, it's very tame for much of his stuff. I mean, insert Frankenchrist.
Think of the Danzig record he did. Think of the Celtic Frost record he did. Like, there's a lot going on there, but they specifically kind of did not want to be making like kind of like the choices that other bands were making. They like the painting side of Geiger's work, it seemed like had already become like a thing that, here's another trend. This is a sculpture that had existed. It's called Life Support. I think he made it around like the 60s or 70s.
Mm-hmm.
And so I believe Dylan had quoted Jeff saying that he was involved with a lady who maybe knew Geiger's wife or girlfriend or manager at the time. And so they were able to get connected, and, they were going to ask for the original piece, but it turned out he was like, it just so happened to be that he was working on like another like version of it, or like reworking the piece itself. So they got to use some Geiger artwork for the cover. The title, I don't, like with these sorts of things we've kind of mentioned, we're not like big on or at least I'm not a big lyrics person. It kind of goes over my head, but it didn't really seem like there was much thought necessarily into the title. They waited basically until all of the album tracks were named, and then went like, well, Heartwork sounds pretty good, let's go with that. We're not going to do one of these like long drawn out kind of weird titles. Heartwork, simple, to the point. Jeff, I believe, was not a fan, but Bill and Ken were kind of like the ones that pushed for it. So thus you have the album being Heartwork. Again, another change, kind of like toning down some of the previous themes of the record. I think there are a lot of there are Carcass lyrics on this album, but they're not as like in your face. Like there's a little bit more subtlety to it. You gotta like kind of dig to find it. It's not like here it is on a platter. Like
this is thinking man's Carcass. You got to dig a little bit, seeing some of the quotes from the guys on what some of the songs are about, or learning what it all is, and the directions that Jeff takes with some of his lyrics on this record, coming from kind of the anarcho-punk background and using some subtle politics here and there on the record, is a big change, right? He enunciates very well, but he still sings in a way that is very graveled to, you still really have to read along with them to fully understand what's being said. But yeah, it again separates them from what they were doing before. Each record progresses that much more forward.
Well, we've talked about the history. We've gone through the making of this record. Let's get into the tracks. Swindle. Having never heard this record, having just kind of spent a good deal of time with it, what do you think?
I didn't really catch that much death metal really in listening to it. To me, it seems more in line with like like I said at the beginning, like a Pantera, or even like not as fast as not as fast as early Metallica, but maybe a lot of similar like way of writing riffs, I guess. Some like the opening of the album to me sounds like it could easily be like one of the moodier like Metallica tracks from Master of Puppets or something like that. It kind of, to me, it just sounds like a heavy metal album. And like I would have like, not that I'm not trying to say I didn't like it, but like if this would have easily fit in with the music I was listening to when I started listening to Metallica, or Countdown to Extinction, or like when I was first getting into just regular heavy metal, like this would have easily fit in to all that stuff I was listening to.
Really accessible, like really catchy, just accessible, right? Like it just fit. It's fundamentally all there. I do not think it's a death metal record. There are elements there for sure, like, but very minimal, like there's only a handful of blast beats on the record. There's only one grind riff on the entire record. One. And even in the parts where there's like crazy tremolo picking, it's very minimal. It's utilized in such a way that it's almost like it was done for the like the impact of it, as opposed to, oh, let's just do it. I mean, I agree. You know, it's considered kind of one of the first melodic death metal records, and like to an aspect, I agree, or to a degree, I do agree. But I still think I think it's just a heavy metal record. I think that's where it comes down to.
Yeah, and I don't think they were necessarily trying to do anything or make people say like, yeah, this is a death metal record, this is that. I think they were just trying to make the best record that they could make. And I mean, I think it does. Like if I'm really going to place it in a subgenre or something like that, I do think it has like some more of the thrash kind of elements to it. There's obviously like some more traditional stuff. Like I definitely hear Judas Priest. I definitely hear Iron Maiden. I some of the solo work, especially the trading back and forth, that's almost like, Marty Friedman, Dave Mustaine to me. Like that's just where I'm pulling from as a person who did grow up on a lot of that traditional work. That's where my brain goes. So again, like Swindle says, like this is like if you were looking for something to like maybe get into a heavier style of music, this would definitely be the one to be like, oh well, shit. Cannibal Corpse, Obituary, like let's listen to some of these like Scandinavian like HM2 bands. Like I think you could easily make the trajectory, especially if people were if it was a major label and they were listening to a lot of those bands, this could easily have guided me into that sort of trajectory. But yeah, I mean right out of the gate, Buried Dreams, which I guess is like it's a little, there's some John Wayne Gacy themes, and then also it's kind of like a weird answer to All You Need Is Love by the Beatles. Yep. Apparently, it's a hard rock track. Like that is just as hard rock as it could get.
It's got that great mid-tempo kind of swing to it. When a lot of the tracks on this record they have this great weighty kind of swing to them, and I think a lot of that is owed to the tuning that the guys play in, which is a B tuning, and they're using lighter strings and so on and so forth. And the guitar sound on this record, without getting too far away, is massive. It is one of the largest guitar sounds I've ever heard. But you look at a track like Buried Dreams, it has these mid-tempo kind of like 4 on the floor kind of pre-Black Album kind of things going on. You look at a track like Embodiment, which is just heavy, like beyond weighty. Starting out with a halftime feel in that and going to more of a full speed, and shit on here that sounds like it wouldn't be out of place on a Crowbar record.
I think that would definitely be the one.
Like
you mentioned, we were talking off camera. I mean, if there's a Pantera track, it's probably Embodiment.
Yeah. I mean, you've got actual like pop structured songs with like No Love Lost, which has this great groovy kind of slidey riff at the beginning of it. And some of these songs are only 2 riffs. Some of them are 1. And they're just variations of that. And they're really focused in on the songwriting aspect on this record. Like, I thought listening to this in hindsight, I would find something I would want to omit. Like, oh yeah, maybe there's a B-side track. No, everything on here to me fits so perfectly. But we know that the songwriting on here is top notch, but I tried to find my favorite riff on the record. And there's so fucking many, it's just really hard. At least for me. And there's moments on here that are as intense as they could possibly be. Like you look at This Mortal Soil, or sorry, did I get that wrong? I'm going back to Mastodon. All right, you look at like This Mortal Coil, and you look at Arbeit Macht Fleisch, and you look at those tracks, and there's some wild shit going on.
Yeah, those are
two.
I mentioned earlier in the episode, I think and maybe it's just the way of the sequencing, and you're on a major label, like,
yep,
kind of hit them hard in the first half with like maybe the more straightforward kind of like hard rock kind of just
out the gate. The A side is,
but man, the back half is so crazy. I mean, fuck yeah, Arbeit Macht Fleisch or whatever however you fucking pronounce it. There's some shit on there that is just wild, and some of it is like you might play like a weird, like brief measure of something, and then it fucks off forever. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
The riff that plays like 3 times, they like pause a song and then it's just the 2 guitars playing, and then they like go into
part.
One of the very few grind parts.
Yep,
that's my favorite. That's my favorite guitar part of the entire album.
It's that stacked 5th kind of thing they're doing. That they ascend, then they descend it back down. That kicks into that grind part. It's like it's 4 seconds long, maybe not even that, into this grind part, and it's like it doesn't feel like it's just shoved in there either. It just feels like it flows so well, and that's another thing to mention is this record flows so fucking well. I look at a track like Doctrinal Expletives, and it's just like locked in stop-start riffs in there, like. There's a point in that track where like that's the Pantera one to me. It makes me think of Pantera and Helmet on those verses.
Is that where it goes like the halftime thing that they do?
Yeah.
Like it's so
there's a point in there where like Jeff brings his vocals in for the first time, and there's like a snarl as it kicks in, and it's like God, it's like this is fucking cool. Like that's what I wanted Mustaine to sound like, was like Jeff in those parts, like to a point, because like. Dave has that kind of like snarl to him on those early records. And that's where I hear, the band has kind of argued that there aren't a ton of Megadeth influences on here, and they may not have really listened to it, but there are some things on here that definitely sound like Rust in Peace or Countdown era Megadeth for sure. Like I think there's a riff in Doctrinal Expletives that's like this weird kind of like, it's not a pull off, but it's a single note riff that's played really fast. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's on Rust in Peace. That's on Countdown to Extinction.
I think I would lean more into like the Megadeth territory just because of the fact that it is like more of a technically proficient thing. And not to say that one's better than the other or whatever, but like, I just think, that 2 guitar kind of like Marty Friedman thing, like all of the guitars that band has had, I think you definitely find like that like Marty Freeman, Nick Menza era of like Megadeth on here, like whether it was purposeful or not. And with that, I mean, you have like just the lead arrangements between Mike and Bill, like the melodicism on here. I mean, from the opening, really, I mean, Buried Dreams is like a straightforward kind of rock track, but like that. Like can't even
that creepy thing
like out of the gate. It's great. Every song really has some sort of like lead line, this harmonized lead line that kind of sticks with you through each thing. I mean, really any song you could pick out. I mean, fuck, like, I mean, I guess we could get into the title track, Heartwork. I mean, it's just
God, that opening riff.
It's been stuck in my brain like all week, like just listening to it over and over again.
I'm 36 and I downloaded this record when I was 14. Well, I'm 35, sorry. Close to fuck enough, right? Once you hit 35, it's all downhill. that riff has been stuck in my head for 20 plus years. Like it's just there's something about how that intros with the drums kicking in, with the blasting that's going on, and how it's locked in to the verses. Like that's a perfect song for me because of how it's written. It's one of the longer songs on the record. There's some nuance, there's some variance in it. The harmonized breaks that are in that song before it kicks into the verse and it goes to that weird kind of like that whole part is fucking perfect. We've talked a little bit about Bill and Mike and their guitar playing on here. The back and forth is crazy. And I want to say that Mike did something on this record that I love is he brought the wah pedal to the forefront.
Yeah.
Because on Buried Dreams, you hear that it's the who are the brothers from the Scorpions?
Oh,
the
the
Michael
Schenker
Schenker, that half-cocked wah thing that Michael is known for in his other projects he's done is there. And it's like fucking obnoxious and I love it. It's just, he's, man.
You can tell who's who when like they're trading
Yes.
back and forth with like the solos and stuff like that. And there's like, I mean, there's some more kind of like rock and roll type solos, but then there's like some of the like more like shredder kind of like classical bits, but everything has weight. Everything's like very dramatic. Everything you can feel it in your gut, essentially when I hear it. And yeah, so I mean like almost every song on here has like some sort of solo or even a progression that is just like at the level of like a solo, and it's all tuneful. It's all like very catchy. It's great.
Their transitions on here are so well done and well thought out. Most of them are really quick. I go back to a track like Embodiment, and there's a slight transition that's just a chug. It's like dun 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 dun, and it's on to the next part. And they're all so well placed and well thought out. And the sequencing on this record is done really well because it just flows. Because when I was prepping for the episode, it's like, oh, I'm going to find a flaw. I'm going to find something that makes me go, I don't want this. And the things on here are like, okay, I wish this song was 4 seconds shorter or something like that. Or maybe this song should have had a fade out. But it all just, it's such a well compacted and precise record. It's 42 minutes long. You get all of these fun songs. Not only are they great songs, all of them have probably been played in the set at some point. I mean, case in point, they were playing the whole record before it came out. Look at like a track like that's less known on here, like Blind Bleeding the Blind, which is just Slayer and Testament worship the entire time. It's just fast. It's thrashy. I haven't brought him up yet, but I look at Ken's playing on this record and it's so precise, and he does a lot of fun shit that's not atypical heavy metal stuff. He's not completely locked in with his kicks on every single riff, right? Like he's kind of playing off with his kicks, or I hate to use this as an analogy, but more of like a Lars thing with his kicks a little bit where they're slightly off here and there. But unlike Lars, Ken's being intentional with that, with the off time stuff. And he knows when to bring the double kicks in. I can't pinpoint which track it is, but there's one track in particular, and it might be Doctrinal Expletives again, where there's big open breaks there, and the drums are like doing these variations of double kicks kind of throughout that whole part, and it's just fucking cool. I'm like, oh, he dialed it back a bit, and it's just really kicking in on these parts.
I did notice like there were like some fills and stuff where I'm like, this could go off the rails at any point.
Oh,
like,
sure.
Because it was like, so like some of the rolls, some of the stuff, but there are like really cool. Like it goes from like very steady kind of like grooves, and then sometimes it's just like a burst of fury, and like the fills like could go off the rails at any fucking moment. But Ken, for not being as I don't want to say present, but not being like most of the input as far as like the structure and the riffs coming from the other three guys, he still like kind of holds it down with the drumming.
I thought the first part of This Mortal Coil was kind of interesting because the guitar riff is very not grindy, but the drums are blasting through like the whole fucking riff. And I was like, this just seems like such a weird like combination, like a weird time to blast during this riff.
And maybe that's like, I think the most like, I don't know, death metal and grindy thing about it really might be the vocals. But even then, like,
Yeah.
I wouldn't say like I don't think he's the best metal vocalist ever.
No.
I think it fits Carcass. I think it's great. And it's cool to hear because like you can definitely hear like he's trying to make it like there is like melody. He's not just like screaming. He's like
being tuneful.
Yeah, it's great. I would have liked to have heard Bill's vocals on this record. I think that would have been like super cool for like there to be that kind of Baron Snake thing that has influenced so many other bands to do it. But I would have loved to hear how that dynamic would have worked. It's a great record. I'm glad that we got what we got, but it would have been interesting to hear that for sure.
I guess my only qualm is like I do wish the bass was a little bit louder in the mix. That would be it. Like there are points you can hear it, but like you are really having to pay attention to hear it. And it's usually when there's a guitar break or something, or like, you know, Jeff does a big slide like in Heartwork. And I think it might even be on the back end of Blind Bleeding the Blind. There's this weird kind of slide going on that you hear for a second. And it would have been cool to hear him a little bit more. But I mean, it's a bulletproof record to me. There's pinch harmonics. I don't want to miss that. Like in areas that make total sense and, you know, emphasize shit. You know, I really haven't spent a lot of time with like the B-sides for this record either. I know there's 2, and it's like, where would you fit any of those in? You know, this is what is it like? Rotten Roll, and there's one more. Yeah. And again, that just shows their tongue in cheek kind of thing to it, right? But these are fun fucking songs, and some of them are a little bit more like, you know, in depth. Like Embodiment, Jeff has gone on to say is, you know, it's about Christianity, but it's not just like Christianity's rubbish. It's a little bit more in depth. This Mortal Coil is a breakdown of the Union in Yugoslavia. And I think you've already mentioned it, but Buried Dreams is kind of a tongue-in-cheek nod to All You Need Is Love.
Yep. Yeah. I think Arby Mock Flesh is like about, I mean, really, you know, these guys grew up in a pretty, you know, industrial part of town. So I think that kind of like reflects in that song. So, yeah, as far as like the lyrical themes go, there's a little bit more thought, and, you know, it's not just about kind of fucked up gore shit. Like, I'm sure if you look for it, it's there, but at the same time, like, it's more about like, I don't know, the human condition, life. I don't know. There's just more. There's a little bit themes outside of their typical repertoire that they're putting into this record.
And Jeff was a big fan, or is a big fan, of like bands like Crass and Discharge and all those political leaning like anarcho punk bands. And, you know, I believe even the to show that the album after this, Swan Song, the artwork for that was done by one of the guys that did all the Crass artwork.
Oh, cool. I didn't know that.
So like he's still got a lot of political leanings. And I think Mike was kind of from the same area that Jeff came from, meaning like musically. You know, with Mike's input on this album, you know, Mike was kind of stuck in Israel, I believe, seeing a girl he was seeing or something along those lines, and his passport was tied up. So he actually didn't get to record anything on the record other than solos. And he helped write 6 of the fucking songs. And for the period of time that Mike was in the band, which was from 90 to like 93, the band would have continued to progress. Don't get me wrong, but it changed the total kind of sound of where that band went. Like, I think Mike just had this melodic sensibility that helped further the already melodic sensibilities that this band had. And, you know, him coming in, doing his solos, like, plays the shit out of those solos. Like, you can tell he's fucking hitting those things out of the park. And, you know, it was, I hate to say it, but I think with this record's release and all the weirdness with like Mike being stuck in another country, and I think this is where you started to see kind of the downward trajectory of where the band was going, which is a bummer to say, but that's it. I think if the band had maybe stuck with Mike, or Mike felt interested, the band could have God done who knows what.
Or I would even say like not even having anything to do with Columbia either. Like I think that
Right.
certainly
That
like
didn't help at all.
it caused a lot of tension dealing with kind of just the bureaucracy of everything. Yeah, no, who'd have thought?
Way. No way. What?
So Dylan is absolutely right. Mike was only present for maybe like a half of the recording, put down the solos. And it seemed like he even kind of says it too, like maybe his focus was elsewhere.
Sure.
He had started a band maybe around the same time of joining Carcass, or in the time that he was in Carcass, called Spiritual Beggars, which is more of like a rock band, if anything. So I think at that point, he definitely put a lot of care and effort into what he was writing for the band. But I think he was more, he wanted to like do his own stuff and have an input in maybe more what he was actually writing and producing. So he ultimately leaves the band after the recording of the Heartwork, which is kind of wild to say because like the only touring or the only time those songs that he wrote were played were prior to the album was being recorded. So he never really actually got to tour when it come out. So Mike ended up doing Spiritual Beggars for a little bit and then later forming Arch Enemy, which huge band.
Massive band.
I want to say there was an article I read as well where Jeff kind of goes over some of the bands that were inspired or influenced by Carcass that he mentions. Allegedly, there might be some riffs or material that's featured on the first Arch Enemy record that may have been co-written by Bill Steer, but he's not credited on it. So I just thought that was kind of interesting there. But
and it could be. I listened to the first Arch Enemy record a few days ago, and like it's definitely in this vein for sure. It is definitely in the vein of Heartwork era, and that's a band that is you either really like them or you don't. I don't think they have different eras of that band as well. But his handprints are all over that band. That's his band. Like it sounds like this type of riffage from Mike yet again. And we'll come back to Arch Enemy once we get kind of to the later part of Carcass's career a little bit.
So Mike being replaced by Mike Hickey, who is a American. He's from Boston. He was a roadie for Carcass, so they kind of knew him that way. He had previously played in Venom. He's featured on Calm Before the Storm, the record from '87. He also played in Kronos's solo project after he had left the band, so he's on some of that material. He also briefly played in Cathedral for a while, and currently, or at some point, he was in the more modern era, he was like a guitar tech for Joe Bonamassa. So just a whole 180 there, I guess.
Yeah.
But they brought him in to do the touring for this record, and very short-lived as well. I think they had hoped that it would work out with Mike Hickey, but it never really seemed like they clicked musically. And then even one point, there was like a time in the tour where he was like, I really can't imagine you playing on the next record, is what Jeff said to him. And he felt the same way too. So they moved on and they recruited former Devoid guitarist and fellow Liverpool native Carlo Regatas. And they had been, I think they had like known each other since at the time of Reek. So like local guy, knew that he played well. I think they kind of mentioned him being like the younger guy. He was like 20. The other guys were like 25. So I thought that was good. Like, oh yeah, we got the young guy with us now. He's really excited. We're all these
haggard,
old,
bitter. They're British. They've been bitter since day one.
So Carlo ended up staying with the band through the next record, so essentially after Heartwork comes out, it sells well, but kind of it's kind of like mixed reviews. Again, you have like fans who are not stoked on it.
Sure.
Jeff kind of mentions like no one gave a fuck at the time. Like, it's kind of crazy that it is like this cult record now. But it did end up, solidifying a deal with Columbia. So the Heartwork, essentially distributed by Columbia in America for their fifth record, they signed directly with Columbia to release the record. And, were hopeful that they would put all this, effort and marketing behind the next record. But I don't think Columbia really knew how to market a band like that, or more probable is that they didn't give a shit, which is,
the phrase tax write-off was used a lot by Jeff of like, they thought it was a tax write-off. I think there's a really good story that I found in some research that said they were walking through like Columbia Records home and they're like, oh, this band was signed to Columbia. This band was signed to Columbia. And they found out from like friends of theirs, like, yeah, you could record a record and the label will just shelve it and never release it if they don't like it. And I think they started to get really nervous about that.
There's like interviews where I don't think they had quite broken up yet, where they're like, oh, we're 100% going to get dropped by this label. Oh, it's like, it's going to happen, which is a crazy thing to
that essentially did happen. They got dropped and they went back to Earache.
Well, they broke up, I should say. They attempted to do this record and have it released for Columbia. They recorded it in like early 95, I think maybe around like April. They had intended for it to get released in October, but it kept getting pushed back. Like the guy who signed them ended up, so there's like a lot of like changing of hands. The guy who signed them like no longer worked for the label. They kept wanting to like have input on like the way it sounded. Like you got to sing a certain way. These songs have to sound a certain way. Essentially just caused a lot of tension. And even Bill essentially said like, I think they were just kind of tired of probably each other and also dealing with that, to the point where like, hey, if this isn't going to come out by October, I'm probably just going to pack it up and call it a day. And that's essentially what happened. Bill said, I'm done. And I think they were kind of tired of trying to find replacements and guitar players, that they were just like, well, Bill started this band. There's no other Bill. Like, we're just not going to do it. And that's, yeah. So they got out of their deal with Columbia, and the record was released in like June of 96 by their former label Earache, but they had already broken up by that point.
It's so wild to think too, like that it took 3 years for this band to completely, it took 3 years for this band to get where they got with Heartwork ultimately. And then it took 3 years for it just to devolve into all of this. The guys were tired. The guys were worn out. The label made it extremely difficult with all of that, which is a common thread with a lot of bands from this era, if not even in today's contemporary bands as well. But you look at Swan Song and the band sounds tired. I think if they had the energy, if they had the intent, if Mike was still there too, everybody was still feeling good about it, and they were able to put as much work and time into that record that maybe they did Heartwork, Swan Song could have been a better record and a different record. I don't hate Swan Song. It's not amazing. There's a few really fun songs on there. Songs that they play live. Like they play Keep on Rotting in the Free World all the time, which is a fun fucking song. Black Star's got a great riff on it. But like a lot of that stuff's just it seemed half-hearted. It seemed tired. It seemed like the guys were worn out. And it's a bummer because Heartwork was just this crowning achievement of a record from this band. And as you said, the band broke up in 95 and the album doesn't get released almost a year and a half later. Half a year. And, the band's done. There's no touring. There's nothing. The band is done. Complete gone. Bill's in Firebird at that point. Is that right?
Kind of. So essentially, 3 of the members of Carcass, you have Jeff Walker, Ken Owen, and Carlo, form Black Star, and they continue to play it is more of like a rock project, I'll say. Bill moves to Australia and he spends a few years there, and he's like leaning into like slide guitar and harmonica, which I guess does, like you mentioned, he kind of comes back to the UK and forms this band Firebird with members of Spiritual Beggars and
Funny,
Cathedral.
right?
So yeah, that kind of ties back into that. Eventually, the band would reunite in 07 for a handful of reunion tours, which would eventually culminate in just another record, Surgical Steel, in 2013. Now, I know Ken unfortunately suffered a pretty severe brain hemorrhage like at the end of the 90s. So he just wasn't able to play at the level he had formerly done with the band. I believe they're still on very, very good terms. I think he's in, like, I want to say even with the Surgical Steel stuff, he's like in some of the videos.
He's in the videos. He does vocals on the record.
Yeah.
He does vocals on the record. Torn Arteries is named after a fake band Ken had when he was a kid. So like they're friends. That's the thing, is the three guys that formed Carcass are friends. Like they're all still communicating and keeping close ties. About that reunion though, before we get too far away from that, the reunion was done. They would take Ken to every show, all of these festival dates and these tours. They'd take him with them. And Michael Ament came back. Arch Enemy's drummer Daniel Erlandson, I believe, came in and did drums for that. Who is his brother is in At the Gates, which is Adrian Erlandson, who is also in Cradle of Filth and many other bands. So they came back. It was this kind of, I think everybody expected the first Carcass record to be done with that lineup, and Mike was like, "Nope, I just wanted to be part of the reunion. I've got Arch Enemy." So on and so forth. So you had some downtime before Surgical Steel came out, and man, those two reunion records are fantastic records.
They're great. I think
it's like Swan Song never happened and they just picked right up.
Yeah, I think those are classic records in their own right. Like I think correct me if I'm wrong, but doesn't Surgical Steel, like, didn't they give that a Hall of Fame?
They gave it a Hall of Fame already, and it was Decibel's top album of the 20 teens.
So that essentially wraps up our very long and thorough explanation of Carcass.
The entire existence of Carcass. We did it.
We did it. Swindle, how do you feel?
I wish that bands didn't feel like signing to a major label was part of what, like, the trajectory was. Like, but Heartwork wasn't a death metal record, but ostensibly, why did a death metal band feel like they needed to sign with Columbia Records to further, like, that's just what bands thought they had to do? Because there are so many bands that have been completely fucked over by major labels, and the only reason why they would have signed to a major label is just because they were taught to think that that was the thing to do. Like, we're not making it big until we sign to Sony or BMG and all these none of the labels, once they realize they're not going to fucking sell anything, they're like, oh, well, fucking keep it in the fucking.
And they mentioned, like, the best that they would do, like, they'd go there or like talk to people who didn't even know, who they were, or like some of the promotional shit that they did would be like, it's the Metallica pre-party. So like some of their tour dates would almost line up the day before, or like, the day after a fucking Metallica date. So they're trying to line it up with that. Like, hey, if you're going to Metallica show this weekend, maybe you check out Carcass. And I think they'd hope that, they would like secure some bigger shows, maybe play with like Megadeth. They did end up playing with like Body Count, I think was like a wild one in the UK. They did a Life of Agony tour. But yeah, it's just like, that's a good point. Cause for a band to start out really with no sort of,
plan,
like
really.
we're just kind of fucking around really. And it really accidentally, if anything, it became bigger than itself, like quickly.
And I think it's much different for bands now, right? Like they know you don't have to have a major label. Hell, you don't even have to have a fucking label anymore. Like there are so many great artists that do get whatever their version of success or big is without a major label. And the best thing that I've noticed in today's kind of age is make the record yourself and just license it and just have it distributed, right? And it is such a bummer to know that there were so many bands, and I think we've all talked about this collective. The music industry still kind of functions like it did in the 60s and the 70s, which is insane. And these guys just got wrapped up in the wheel of, well, we have to do it this way or else we're not going to have this distribution. And maybe it was just signing to a different independent label. Maybe it was like, hey, maybe Metal Blade can give us something, right? Maybe Century Media or Nuclear Blast or one of those other labels, right?
They seem to have found a good home with Nuclear Blast in the past.
They sure have.
10 years or so.
Yeah. And anytime their records come out, there's always great promotion behind it. They're in every place you could go, every record store. Yeah, I agree. It's such a bummer especially when we look at albums that are 30 years old and you realize, God, they got caught up in it too. It's like that. They just thought they had to do that thing.
But is it Judas Priest, the album that we talked about forever ago, when they signed to that label, they like tried to control how many people were in the band because that's just like, this is how many people should be in a band. And these are the instruments that should be on your record. Like,
yes,
let us make the shit we want to make.
We can make you guys the monkeys, but with leather.
Yeah. The leather monkeys.
But with all that said, like, yes, maybe some things that ultimately dissolved the band, like it just took some time and the record being out there to like kind of do its thing and like spread its influence, which is like, I mean, we see it to this day. And like Dylan mentioned, like people specifically will try to emulate like either Heartwork era, or maybe they don't like that and they want to go with the kind of grotesque, like Symphonies of Sickness kind of version of this band. But it is very clear now that like when the band goes out, they release a record, there is a respect, there is an appreciation for like what they do, who those people are, the playing, like they're a classic band. There's just the output's there. Like this record will stand the test of time. And it's just like such a perfect kind of record. Like whether it's like grindcore, death metal, like it's a great fucking record.
I think I'm going to angle towards what Swindle said. Like it's a heavy metal record, right? It's classic. It's as close to perfect for me as it could ever get. It's one of my favorite albums of all time. It's the gateway record for this band for me. It is such I can remember nuance and shit on it that I never thought I'd remember, and it just pops into my head. The videos for No Love Lost and Heartwork and all of that. It's just a fun, perfect presentation of what a really well thought out record could sound like and what a really well written record could sound like from four guys that just ultimately liked playing music and progressing without it kind of going into like prog rock territory, right? Just a great record that influenced so many others. I don't think you would have certain eras of metalcore without this record. You wouldn't have certain eras of death metal without this record. Hell, you wouldn't have some of the better grind bands, I think, without them not wanting to sound like this record and wanting to sound like the early era, right? Like, fuck, Carcass sold out with Heartwork. We got to make something that sounds like Symphonies and make it better, right? We got to remind people that still exists. And it's a timeless record. Enough said.
We've reached that point in the episode where we like to share some things we've been listening to, some recommendations of things we think you should check out. My first one, got some vampires are back. Just a bunch of Draculas making some spooky music. Worm announced their upcoming record, Necropalace. It's going to be out on February 13th, 2026 through Century Media Records, their debut for the label. They released the title track as a single. There's a video. It's like 10 minutes at least. It sounds great. I fucking love it. It opens up with like the fucking organs. The cover looks like something out of fucking Castlevania. There's like a dissection like tribute on the back, it looks like. It's cool. I love this band. I mean, I love Foreverglade. I fucking love Star Path and Blue Nothing. I think this record, I just love this band. I think they are doing some like really interesting guitar forward music. If you like all of like the shredding and like the back and forth guitar solos that Carcass does on this fucking record, you'll definitely like Worm, because they do it like on everything they put out.
You know, it's wild because what was it? Literally a couple weeks back, I mentioned in our group chat, like, what the fuck happened to the band? Like, we haven't heard anything from them in a while. And like Century Media just drops a bomb on us. Like, no prep, no anticipation, just drops it. Here you go, fuckers.
I didn't have to fucking hear a goddamn thing. I was like, pre-order that shit. It's like,
yep,
like a double vinyl that's got like a booklet or some shit like that.
Did you get the red one?
Yeah, I got the red.
I did too.
It's bound to be cool. There's some guest appearances. We have some live members and some recording members of Holder, that some of which have like performed with Worm in the past. You're also going to have fucking Marty Friedman on this record to tie it back into Megadeth. I think he plays a solo on the last track. Mastered by Arthur Rizek, however you pronounce it. He did like all of the production work on this record. And then some great artwork by a guy who's like done some of the coolest, kind of very fantastical pieces you've seen from like Blind Guardian, Hammerfall, Immolation, In Flames. Like, very, very stoked for this record.
Yep. It's going to be a fun one.
I can't tell. I couldn't tell. I couldn't tell at all.
Swindle, I hate music. On the other side of things, I've been like listening to just maybe stuff that doesn't necessarily require like a ton of attention or like just a feel good record. Tony Molina, On This Day. I fucking love Tony Molina. He writes a lot of really great kind of like simple, but also like very melodic pop music. Kind of sounds like Laurel Canyon a little bit. Like some very like interesting classical like scales that are kind of thrown in there. He released On This Day this year, 21 songs, most of them again like under like 2 minutes maybe, but they're fucking great. Just nice, like really great palate cleanser. You'll fucking enjoy the shit out of it.
My first recommendation is Spencer Radcliffe and Everything. He released an album called Ohio Vision on 11/14 via Orindel Records. I think it's only out on cassette so far. I don't know if there's any plans to put it out on vinyl or whatever. It's kind of maybe alt country, but it's more, I think this album leans more into like Neil Young rock or something than like his previous, which was way more country leaning. I really liked his previous record, Hot Springs. Like the A side had like registered bangers on it, but I think this new full record is better than Hot Springs. What did you think, Austin?
I loved it. And it's so funny to like another artist that we were like, where is this guy? Where the fuck have you been? And then just literally drop the whole record. Yeah.
Yeah. Not even a single, nothing.
Well, wasn't that how the Algernon record dropped too? Wasn't it just like out?
That one, Snow Caps, right? Well, there was kind of a little bit of a tease, right? Or something. Like
there were no singles.
No, it was just out. Like bam. So I kind of like it. I like that. I kind of miss that. Yeah. So what else you been listening to? Anything?
My second recommendation is another record that's coming out on February 13th of next year. The title track for the new Converge record, the song Love Is Not Enough, dropped this week. It's fast. It's fucking streamlined. This song doesn't really have too much crazy guitar work. It's pretty much like one or two riffs all the way through, but it is fast as hell.
Mm-hmm. Intense. One thing I want to bring up is obviously, like, I knew the title. Did not know it was coming out the day before Valentine's Day with that fucking title.
Yeah, Love Is
which is so perfect. Man, just a band, what, almost 40 years into their career, 35 years in their career, just like dropping shit like this. It's the first standalone full length from the band since 2017. And then the first thing since the collaboration they did. Was that 2020 or 2021? Yeah. Like, it's been a minute. It's been a fucking minute for these guys.
I haven't seen the track listing. I don't know if it's out yet, but I do know for a fact that in one of like the Converge social media posts, Ben Kohler said they recorded like 20 or 24 tracks for the record or something. So I don't know if it's a double fucking joint or what.
There's 11.
Oh,
There's 11. That was the first thing I fucking checked. I was like, oh, well, let it be good, but not a double record. Maybe you get something that comes out later.
Right.
Yeah.
God, yeah, there's a lot of good shit coming out in like 2026 already. Like, it's fucking wild. I have 3. So the first one I wanted to start out with is a bit of a lighter record. I've really been enjoying the new Mountain Goats record, Through This Fire Across from Peter Bakian. Which is, I had no knowledge of it. I know of the Mountain Goats. I know of John Darnell, obviously a writer, big fan of extreme music. So it always drew me towards them and learning that like Eric Rutan did some production work for him years ago. But this record's sad, fun, interesting, progressive. It's a base, from what I've grasped, it is essentially a musical about a bunch of guys on a boat. And it's like, musically, it starts out and it's this almost like progressive, like late 80s era kind of Rush thing. I'm like, what am I fucking listening to? And my girlfriend and I were in the car one day and we listened to it. She's like, this is really good. It's like, yeah, this is fucking great. So that record's on my list. And the newest release from Lamp of Murmur, The Dreaming Prince in Ecstasy. Man, I've been looking forward to that thing. This year's had some pretty great black metal records that have dropped: Agriculture, Black Braid, Lamp of Murmur, One of Nine, like some really good black metal records. And this is no different. I was a big fan of their last release, Saturnian Bloodstorm. And
Kazoo Night.
Good. Yeah, thank you. Baba Booey. And it's great. It's a journey. It's got equal parts like Immortal, and there's some stuff from like, I hear Satyricon in there, and I also hear like Nick Cave elements on it from like some weird vocal stuff that's going on. It's just a really fun fucking record. And lastly, if you've never listened to the 2 most recent Carcass records, do it. Listen to Surgical Steel, listen to Torn Arteries. I went back and listened to those just over the last couple of days and just forgot how fucking fun and like great and honed in those records are. And the fact that you've got Jeff, Bill, and like to a lesser degree Ken all still putting stuff together into their 60s at this point, it's like, just bring it on. Let these old codgers do it and have fun doing it.
Check it all out. It's listed below. You can check out some of the things we've been listening to in our official playlist, Riffs on Repeat, Hits from the Crypt. You can also follow us at Riff Worship Pod on Instagram and Twitter. You can email us at riffworshippod@gmail.com. We got some guests coming up. We're going to be talking about some more records. Maybe we'll do a Christmas record. I don't know. Carcass Christmas. I don't know where I was going with that. I blanked.
Leave that all in.
Leave it. Let's see.
Oh, my baby. Oh,
yeah, we're gearing up for kind of our last bit of episodes for the remainder of the year. I'm sure we'll do a best of, but until then, for myself, for Dylan, for Swindle, you've been listening to Riff Worship. We'll be back next week with something else. See ya.